Hi, my name is Hannah Doss. I am the Park Interpretive Specialist here at Donner Memorial State Park. And November is Native American Heritage Month. So here in the Lake Tahoe and Donner Lake region, we have a lot of Native American history. We wanted to take the time to thankfully acknowledge the Native peoples, ancestral homelands in which we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant culture that the Native Americans still have who are here today. Thank you so much for taking care of the lands and respecting the Earth's natural resources. Many tribes inhabited the Lake Tahoe and the Donner Lake region. The main tribes were the Miwok, the Maidu, the Nisenan, and the Washoe. So today I'm going to focus on the Washoe, and I'm going to teach you directly from an educational resource that the Washoe tribe published. You can find it online at the fs.usda.gov website. The Washoe are the original inhabitants of Dau-au-aga, or Lake Tahoe, and all the land surrounding it. Tahoe is actually a mispronunciation of Da'au, meaning lake. It is actually estimated that Washoe populations were about 3,000 people, although it's hard to really know for sure. As you probably know, the winters can be very brutal in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Most Native Americans did not camp on the mountain in winter. So as soon as the weather permitted, the young adults would begin making the trip to the shores of Lake Tahoe. In early June, thousands of several different kinds of fish began to swim up from the depths of Lake Tahoe. There were so many fish that the people waded into the water with baskets and could just scoop them up and throw them on the banks. The shores of Lake Tahoe offered several types of edible plants and medicinal plants. Many plants became ripe for only a week or even a few days, so it was very important that accurate information about the location and the habits of the plants be passed on from one Washoe to another. The Washoe understood the growth cycles of plants, the effects of weather on growth, and they also had intimate knowledge of the soils and specific growing conditions. One day, the Washoe discovered that there were new settlers coming into the area. The Washoe had heard about the new intruders before they ever saw one. As the Spanish invaded the California coast to establish missions and convert the Native Americans to Catholicism, the Washoe began to make fewer and fewer trips to the west coast until eventually those trips stopped altogether. Neighboring tribes that escaped into hiding in the high mountains probably warned the Washoe about the invaders. John Fremont wrote the first written description of the Washoe in 1844. Fremont described the Washoe as being cautious of being close to him, but in time when he showed no aggression, the Washoe actually came forward and gave him handfuls of pine nuts, which is the highest form of hospitality the Washoe could offer. As more colonizers began infiltrating Washoe land, it was not long before relations grew hostile. There was actually interaction between the Washoe and the Donner Party. In 1846, the Washoe actually saw the Donner Party wagons. They'd never seen wagons before. The Washoe described seeing the wagons and wondering if they were a monster snake. En route to California, the Donner Party got stuck here in the Sierras because of snow. The Washoe checked in with the stranded travelers a few times and actually brought them food when they could. And when the Forlorn Hope group of the Donner Party left this area and finally did make it over the mountains, one member stumbled into a Native American Miwok village, and they took him in, tried to nurse him back to health as best they could, and then they went and saved the other Forlorn Hope group members out of the woods and took them all down to Sutter's Fort. So the Native Americans were really instrumental in helping Mr. Sutter realize how desperate the Donner Party situation was up here in the Sierra Nevadas. In 1848, gold was discovered by the settlers in California. And until then, most Washoe had never actually even seen white people. But soon, this became impossible. The wagon trains came by the hundreds. And because most of the wagon trails had previously been Native American trails, encounters were numerous. Most of the new people were just passing through, but by 1849, several began to establish seasonal trading posts in Washoe Territory. By 1851, year-round trading posts were established and colonizers became permanent residents on Washoe land. The settlers often chose to live on some of the most fertile gathering areas that the Washoe depended on. Fishing restrictions were imposed upon the Native Americans, and sport hunting by the settlers reduced their sage hen population. Sage hens used to cover the hills like snow, but were killed off by sport hunting. The Washoes were then put on reservations, but reservation life was hard for them to adapt to. They were traditionally a free-roaming people, and now they were restricted and confined by boundaries, and they were under the control and constant monitoring of Indian agents that pressured them to renounce their ancient customs in favor of colonial ways of living. Government officials went as far as to prohibit the use of traditional Washoe medicine. They banned gift giving, and they banned games that exchanged money, even though similar games like poker were played by the colonizers. Under the requirements of the General Allotment Act of 1887, each individual Washoe finally did begin to receive some land from the government. But it was not until 1893 that allotments were made to the Washoe. And most of that land proved to be virtually worthless. Some of the land didn't even have water rights. The land also did not have those traditional plants and animals that the Washoe had grown up knowing how to live off of. Their land was stripped of all timber, and they couldn't gather those pine nuts that they traditionally lived off of. Legally, the plots of land were supposed to be 160 acres, but some Native Americans were only awarded 120 acres because there were already settlers on some of the land that they were supposed to be given. There were people that didn't respect the Washoe land that was given to them, and they would illegally graze their cattle on the Washoe's land. Children as young as 5 years old were often rounded up and taken from their families and forced to go to traditional American schoolhouses. Now, when those children were taken from their parents, neither one of them knew why they were being taken and where they were going. Can you imagine how scary that was? These schools tried to strip the children of their traditional Native American culture. They made them wear uniforms, made them cut their hair. They were punished if they spoke their native language. And due to the children not being used to the germs and diseases of the settlers, the death rates were high because of influenza, smallpox, and cholera. Today in schools, we are often taught a glazed over version of this history. It's important that we acknowledge the truth about what happened to the natives of this land. It's important that we think about how our ancestors affected a culture that had been here since the beginning. And it's important to think about how we are going to do better going forward. It's also important that we acknowledge that Native Americans are very much still here today. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you continue to educate yourself on Native American history, and also check out that pamphlet I mentioned earlier, written by the Washoe tribe. It's really, really interesting. All right, have a great day.